We are go. This is Pitchdeck Asia. We're on a tour of the startup ecosystem in Asia, uncovering the unsung heroes, the builders of the startup ecosystem, everybody from the early stage venture funds to the co-working space. It just so happens today we've got them all in one place. Grace Sai. Grace, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for inviting us here to Found 8. So Found 8, we are here on Anson. You have... let's say, well, five?
Five in Singapore.
Five locations. We're just talking off air. For those that don't know, the original story, the OG origins of Found 8, how did it all start? We're going back, way back now, 2012, nearly 8 years ago. The hub.
Yeah.
So those that remember the hub, let's talk about that first. Where did this all start? So.
Those who remember the hub are the OGs of the startup ecosystem here, you included. And those who have been there, you know, in that first rate building we were there for 3.5 years, they can never call us Found 8 today.
Right.
Still. They refuse to, you know,
Right.
they still love that whole first tribe that got together. Before that, there wasn't much of a startup community in Singapore. No, but Found 8 is a recent merger between Collision 8 and Found rebranded from the hub just last year,
Right.
actually. So we just did 2 rounds of rebranding in a year. It's been great, but the history of it was when I was doing my MBA in the UK and spent the summer in the Bay Area. And at that time, the movement of co-working was just beginning in the US. You know, I don't think we was anything yet at that time. And the hub was, you know, on Market and 5th Street in San Francisco. And the moment I stepped in, I was like, wow, you know, just that infectious courage that was going on. And I was like, it was in the old San Francisco Chronicle building. It was old newspaper factory. And I was like, we need this in Asia.
What's this? What was that vibe that you sensed?
Yeah, it was just uninhibited. It was courageous. It was infectious, very positive. A lot of them were also using business and technology for good. You know, it wasn't just a tech startup movement, but also the whole impact tech as well. So I got in touch with the global network back in 2010. And then really decided to come back to Asia and not work in London or San Francisco after the MBA to start it. And so I took about 9 months to start it, and we opened in May 2012.
On Somerset.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the tribe, you mentioned this word tribe. I'm fascinated by what that could mean. Who were these this band that you pulled together of people that originally inhabited the first version of the hub?
Yeah, it was so cool. It was like we were 400 over members in no time. And, you know, even till today, you might know Tech in Asia or Golden Gate Ventures or Jungle Ventures, and they all kind of like started out of the hub, you know.
They're all based there.
Yeah, they started their office there, or they grew into there, and they were there for many, many years. So when we looked back and we measured, for example, one measurement that we tracked was the amount of funds raised by our community collectively for the past years. We just reached a $500 million mark. So there was a lot of activity. You know, it wasn't necessarily reported in the media all the time. At that time, there wasn't an ecosystem, right? There was no you and no podcast.
Very early days.
Very early days.
Absolutely.
But things were already happening, and we were so privileged to be witnessing that.
So I even remember, I spoke to Vinny Laurier from Golden Gate, and he was saying, I think it was in 2011, he did FailCon, which was like the first time really anybody had done a conference about failure.
Yeah,
in
2012.
It's 2012. Okay, so it's 2012. So right about that time. So really, you were there right at the early days of Singapore. I mean, you know, I came to Singapore first in the 90s. It was very different, and it was very much
We're clearly from a different generation, Graham.
Yeah, I'm slightly older.
No.
I confess. I was a baby at the time, so a baby graduated. But that then, you know, it moved into that sort of startup ecosystem, which really started about 2012. What was it like back then for those? I mean, now we have so much government support, so many programs, there's co-working spaces, early stage funds. There's all the support you need out there. Maybe what we're kind of missing, I think, in Asia, Southeast Asia particularly, is the second generation angels who have exited from startups and then are investing. There's a lot of high net worths who aren't really angels, so that there's sort of that missing. But support-wise, we're there. What was it like back in 2012? You really must have been sort of out on a limb, really an outlier in Singapore back then.
Well, to be fair, I think there was already the makings of the first generation of entrepreneurs before 2012. You know, even the government had gone through its own pivots, its own learning. That's the good thing about the Singapore government, right? Like it just dove right in back in 2009 when the economic crisis hit, and they were like, you know, we need to create our own jobs, we need to create our own hallmark companies and not just rely on FDI. So I think from a policy top-down level, 2009 was when it began in Singapore. But yeah, there was already a first generation of founders then. They have not yet all exited yet. Now we're actually seeing a recycling of the second generation. You're right. I think, you know, there's one millionaire in every 11 people in Singapore. You throw a rock and you might hit a millionaire. Right? But you're right. I mean, in terms of, you know, funneling that capital into the startup dream, right, is rare. We are doing things to help lubricate that ecosystem with old money, as we would call it. The one of the things we do is we're launching a family business lab. So we're targeting the next generation leaders, you know, the second gens, the third gens, the fourth gens of large, rich, crazy rich Asian families, right? The real CRAs. Who want to learn how to now form their own differentiated dynasties away from their parents or their grandparents, and they want to learn about this startup method. They're also curious about how to park some of their capital as LPs into funds, or even themselves becoming GPs of funds. So we're doing our part there, because my co-founder now, the founder of Collision, Michelle Yong, is the fourth generation of the Warhub family. You know, they're a construction family. They built gardens by the bay. They are just finishing Jewel at Changi right now. So how do you transform a 94-year-old construction family business into doing something cool like that? Like we have 4 floors, going to be 5 floors in this building where we're at right now. This is the level 20. We also have the penthouse level, and there are 3 levels of co-working and 2 levels of co-wellness. It's the first concept in the world too, where all the fitness and wellness professionals can be their own entrepreneurs by sharing this infrastructure that we have, right? So we really believe that we're still scratching the beginning, the surface of releasing talent and capital from the wider population in Singapore.
Let's talk about that, because this journey, it started well before, but there was a pivotal moment when you were in the Bay Area and you saw in the old newspaper building what it could be, right? And you saw all that. You mentioned some of the words like courage, for example. So, obviously you've picked these words carefully to describe what was going on at the time. And now you're talking about family offices, which, even though they exist all over the world, it's a very Asian thing, isn't it? So I think, looking from the outside, so people can understand where we are in Southeast Asia, particularly, what family offices are all about. Especially that sort of second, third, fourth generation of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It sounds easy. If your granddad made a lot of money out of retail, it sounds easy for you as the grandkid then to go and start another business. But in fact, it's actually quite hard, because, why are you doing the startup thing where you can get 12% in a shopping center, right?
I don't want to be them.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. I think they have a much harder time than we have, the self-made ones.
Yeah.
Maybe like you and I, where we can just ask for forgiveness and not permission.
Right.
They need that permission to deviate.
So how do you, you're building a lab. How do you, what was the challenge there? Is it a mindset shift more than anything? That allow them the space to experiment and make mistakes and do it outside of the main sort of family office brand?
So I don't really build businesses based on mindset shifts, because that can take a generation, which is 42 years. And there's no business model. But behavioral psychology, right? Like if you familiarize them with different ways to behave, then it will eventually lead to different ways of thinking. So it's all about getting quick wins, fast successes, pilots out of the door, showing quick wins to their parents, to their grandparents, and then take it from there. So yeah, really sort of spreading the startup methodology. That then will spread the mindset, right?
Yeah.
But we can't start with the mindset per se, because that's very
Too long.
and
Yeah.
it's too intangible. So we start with the startup methodology and make them basically create something from post-it to paper, from paper to pilot, right? We call it. So we'll see. We're launching that this year. But yeah, back in 2010, 2012, I remember that I didn't know any family offices then, when I was raising that seed round, and so I had to ask my mom to make 30 of her best fruit cakes, and I literally sold them for $80 each,
Right.
That
was that your
my
seed
first
rounds?
Yeah, that was, and no, to last 2 more months, because I was running out of money already by 7 months.
Oh, it was not to eat the fruitcake.
No,
so
I sold the fruit
Okay.
cakes, and no, I bribed with no. In that last 2 months, I raised the seed round, got the first team, and
Right.
got the first building. But that was the extent that I had to do. Now it's so different.
Do you think you came from a different generation of entrepreneurs, in the sense that we're seeing now? I mean, we do online demo days, and we're seeing startups now raising seed rounds of 1 million, 2 million seed rounds. I mean, everything's sort of shifting, obviously, and that seems to be normal now. And now, so what's shifting is a pre-seed round that's sort of emerging. There's a lot of pre-seed funds now, people writing tickets of like 25, 50 up. So, but there seems to be a generation of entrepreneurs who maybe, grew up in having to really hustle hard and sell fruitcakes, right? Because they, if they raised $1 million now, the first thing they do is not necessarily go out and buy a domain name for 100 grand, right? They understand the value of every single dollar. Is it too easy now to raise money, and therefore people inflating those seed rounds? What are you seeing in terms of the sort of the early stage startups going out there? Are there still people out there who, going out and hustling every single dollar, or do you think there's too much money in the market?
Depends on which market. I think Singapore is quite a special case. We have the most VC money out of China, outside of China in Asia. That's quite a lot for, a very small island state. I think there is definite availability of capital that is made more transparent and accessible. It doesn't mean that companies will still succeed because there is capital around, I think the requirements and the tenacity required to build a business has always been the same. It's easier to get in, but it is as hard to get out.
Yeah, even harder maybe, because of the cost of hiring. Like, you're competing with Google and Facebook now for the best talent, right? So
yeah, but there's certainly been a shift of how success is defined. Like I was in a board meeting, and other board members were sharing that now investment bankers and PE funds, right, they are discouraging their companies from making profit, because once you're able to show the extent of profit you can make, that's it. You cannot fetch the high valuation based solely on the story of growth.
right.
That's interesting, because I still come from the generation that believes in a sustainable, profitable business.
That's why we're here, right? To make money and make a profit at the end of the day, and add some value, right?
And it's more than that as well, right? It's to create some value, but also it's to respect the market feedback loop, right? Like the market tells you if this is rightly priced. The market tells you if this is value. This one you can get rid of, things like that. But in the new world order, I mean, everyone is listing on billion-dollar losses in the stock market, and to hear that investors are actually preventing them from, discouraging them from hitting that first dollar mark, because then you will have a fixed EBITDA margin, or you will have that fixed profit margin, and you can't paint that growth story and that high valuation anymore. I think that really needs a relook, as to how VCs are behaving.
Where do you think we are in the early stage market? Because, I mean, I mean, Found Ventures is that's your obviously
Early stage fund. Yeah.
yeah, an early stage fund, and there seems to be a real growth in early stage investment here in Asia because, as you say, you rightly say, it's easier to get into the game now. So whether it's people who are the corporate dropouts, with 20 years experience, I know what's broken in banking or fintech. There's a lot more people coming into that market now. It's easier to get in because anybody can, especially the growth of co-working as well. It's allowed people to start a business effectively where previously you would spend 6 months looking for a space and all that sort of stuff. So this early stage market is growing across Southeast Asia. What does that, what's happening in that at the moment? You're seeing the kind of startups coming in. What kind of trends are happening in that market?
I would say the quantity is definitely has increased. The quality has increased, but to a lesser extent than the quantity. I think the most, certainly the most respected funds in Southeast Asia, they still stick to their discipline of investing slowly, investing carefully. They're responsible for their LPs' money. So I would say that the really good funds, they are still very, very disciplined in how they park money and who they park money with. They certainly, VC funds in last few years, right? We may have looked at maybe 1,000 over deals a year. Now it can go up to 3,000, 4,000 deals a year. So the quantity has definitely ballooned. And talent is coming from more interesting places, right? Like Vietnam and Indonesia, all these countries that, 3-4 years ago might not have been that attractive for VC funds to enter, right? Because of geopolitical reasons. But now it's more a parity kind of thing. Talent can come from anywhere.
Yeah. And once Vietnam comes online, that's a really interesting development.
Yeah,
and once those guys get up the learning curve, they work hard over there, right? Anywhere across Southeast Asia as well. You see, once they get access to the tools and the know-how and the capital, it's an even playing field. How do you filter out all those deals? If you've got 3,000 or 4,000 pitch decks coming your way and deals coming across your door, funds usually would operate through, immediacy, whoever is in the network or referral. But when you're sort of dealing in such a big market, what are you looking for now beyond the referrals? Are any sort of like indicators that you look for in startups or their pitch decks or their language or their sector, which helps you sort of qualify that a bit better?
That hasn't changed. I think, like I say, with more noise, I think we have to even be more careful about which is the signal and which is the noise. And even more we go back to the foundations of really just good assessment of founder character, team. When you're in an early stage investing field, you can't really judge based on many other things.
There aren't many other things. There's no revenues in many cases.
Yeah. So of course traction is still you can still prove traction at that early stage. But it's still very much back to the people and back to the founders. A new trend, I would say, what you would call the corporate dropouts. I would call them, I just had a Business Times interview last month, and I was like, the midlife crisis is the best invention ever, because it really makes 40-year-olds pause and think about how they want to spend the second half of their lives. And the wisest ones I know will tend to be brave enough to say that, okay, whatever, the corporate track might not have been for me, I'm going to leave a bigger impact now through a different route, right? And these are really interesting. This is a really interesting talent pool, if you ask me. The research has shown that the best entrepreneurs in the world are around 42 years old.
Yeah, I've heard 45.
Yeah, somewhere there, right?
Harvard,
but not 25.
Yeah, right.
Not 25.
Not your typical sort of in a pair of sandals out of Stanford, right?
So those we will it definitely it will make it harder to chuck away their decks.
Yeah.
If they have that background.
Very interesting. You're talking about founder character, and you I think must be a good judge of character in the sense that you mentioned talent, and I think this is a talent game in the sense that you have seen many patterns So if 4,000 pitch decks come your way, maybe you have X number, 100 meetings or however many it is, coffees with founders. You get to read founders based on, that looks a bit like somebody I invested in before, similar kind of characters and so on. You mentioned, for example, like those midlife crisis people. So obviously they're one group of founders which you're aware of and you see what works and maybe what doesn't work. What else do you look for in that, what I call the emotional due diligence? Is like, it's not on the pitch deck, it's not in the spreadsheet. It's the things people say, it's how they address other people, it's how they see problems and so on. So imagine someone like your antenna for this is probably really well tuned because you've seen so many.
Through the years.
Yeah. What do you look for?
I would say that they normally have a quality and clarity of thought around the business that they want to set up, around the problem that they want to tackle. That would distinguish them from a wannabe, that would distinguish them from someone who wants to be part of the startup bandwagon but not necessarily have that X factor insight. We are looking for that clarity of insight, and you know it when you hear it. And then on top of that, you still want someone who has that dominant way of thinking around a problem or an industry, but yet still, he or she is not an asshole, like he or she is still coachable and it's you want to work with this person for the next 7 years. That's that's the duration of a VC and portfolio company duration of a relationship, right? It's not if you and it's physiological as well, right? Like if you find yourselves dreading a meeting with this potential founder that you are going to invest in, that's a sign. That's a sign on its own.
7 years of that is going to be tough, right?
Yeah. And if the beginning, if in the beginning you already feel like that, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, I think it was. I was listening to Jason Calacanis talk about 7 years, and I think he says it's like a marriage, and you got to look for people who are good at communicating, right? Because many of the problems that occur in a startup is when they don't communicate. So they don't communicate to the investors, they don't communicate to their people and so on. So all those sort of clarity of thought and that sort of dominant mindset, if you like, but not being arrogant, like having a sort of a leadership position, but being able to accept feedback and listen to people as well. Everybody's got their own sort of thesis about what makes great startup founders. I was even with Magnus just over here in Antler. He talks about I can't do his Norwegian accent, but the spike. He says that they have that spike, sort of, you say X factor, right?
Yeah.
He says the spike. How do you
the
define
X
it?
insight, I call it.
What is that? What is it you look for? And do you think, I mean, for me personally, I think successful startup founders are a bit odd, a bit different. If you took a bell curve of personality, they're sort of in that 20%, but not too extreme that they can't function. They maybe face a lot of rejection, like in their thoughts. Like if they had an obvious thought, everybody else would be doing it. But they're the ones going out there saying, I think it's like this, and nobody understands what I'm trying to do. They're the black swan.
Those are the best ones because then you're not too late into the game and it's not yet an accepted mass market thing, and so when you enter, you tend to gain a larger upside, a larger float on top of that. Yeah. So I have an example, if you want. One of the companies we invested in is Horangi. It means tiger in Korean, I think. But Paul, the founder of Horangi, used to be the head of Palantir in Southeast Asia, and his insights into the world of cybersecurity and intelligence and all that during the Palantir years led him to believe that there is a whole long tail of not Fortune 500 companies, right? Companies outside of Fortune 500 that need cybersecurity in the next decades, right? And he has found a way to democratize cybersecurity protection and prevention and solving, right? To that long tail of companies, and we love that you can clearly see that's going to be needed in the world. And it's not being served yet by the big incumbents. And this is the right guy to kickstart that movement. And they're doing so well now, So that's really an example.
It's a great example, yeah. it's a great example that you imagine when he was talking to corporates or large enterprises, they were like, okay, there's the door, we don't get it until somebody saw that. And this is the challenge, isn't it? In the startup ecosystem, they talk about the black swans, like it's the 1 in 10. I think Paul Graham says that all the returns are found in a very few amount of startups. And most startups, the investments will fail, at least the returns, right? So how do you identify those? Because the challenge is the best ideas are disguised as bad ideas, right? When you meet them, until, because otherwise if it was a good idea, everybody will be in. It would all be priced in, right? There'll be no upside there.
But that's also where the hard work of being a good fund comes. You can't be lazy as a VC. I think the way you position yourself in the market, or the position you take in the market, in that funnel of the market, if you are able to be at a position where you can identify these great ideas before people, before the others, that's when you stand to gain as a fund, right? So that's one advantage of why we set up a fund on top of a co-working community, because we can see that talent. People who are coming from outside of Singapore, they would normally land in a hub or found 8, right? That's their default, So we get to capture that talent pool like almost as gatekeepers. That's when the alumni of our community say, hey, you guys, let's set up a fund. They would anchor it. So the Found Ventures is anchored by our alumni, people who have made it and have succeeded. So the founders turn funders, right? To your first point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what's needed, right?
Yeah. So that we thought that was an interesting stack to build.
Where do they sort of fit together so people understand which is serving which here, which is sort of the main day job, so to speak, and which is the co-working space there to funnel success stories into the fund, or is the fund really to serve the co-working space?
It's become synergistic.
Right.
Yeah, it's become synergistic. I think almost half of our portfolio companies choose to work out of our spaces because they get that post-investment support. And then through the co-working campuses as well, we see that flow of talent, right? So now with Found 8, we each had an investment fund coming into the merger, right? Of course, the funds are not part of the merger because they have different investors and different LPs, but we are all sort of like sister companies now, and the funds, the other fund is only investing companies in our community.
So that's great. I love what you're doing, and it's absolutely needed. It really, a lot of people talk about community building, and then maybe they have the yoga classes and the free beer, but at the end of the day, it's real support.
It's
absolutely
real community building is the toughest part of running a business.
Right.
It is so unsexy and so much hard work. It looks effortless on the outside, but that's because there's so much effort behind the scenes, and I think money can buy through that for a short period of time, but we certainly believe that a true community takes time to build.
Yeah, well, let me now that we're sitting here, ask you for some advice as somebody who's sat. And
I don't know if I can give advice. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, because you have built a great community here. You have been active in the early stage funds as well, and the startup ecosystem since year dot here in Singapore. Our thesis is that early stage investors invest in people first rather than ideas and products. Like you said, it's that founder character that they invest in, and we feel that here in Asia, and particularly in Southeast Asia, there are plenty of platforms and lists and databases. But as an early stage investor, I'm looking, I want to hear your story and how you think about a particular problem and that sort of clarity of thought. So, our sort of bet, if you like, with Pitchdeck is that if we get founders onto the show and record their videos, it's as good as being able to see and have a coffee without traveling all over Asia of all these different startups across Asia. The challenge now is connecting that with funds, because this is an early stage filter. Effectively, it's a qualitative filter, if you like.
You mean founders who appear on the show?
Yeah, so they go onto the show, they talk about their story, their why, and investors can go in there and have a look and say, okay, I really like what that person's saying. You said about that sort of physiological match as well. So we create a platform for emotional due diligence. All the other numbers and stuff are fine. But at this stage, let's see if I like this person. And if I like this person, let's meet this person for a coffee. And here's how I can access 5,000 startups in Asia. How do I, for example, or how do we as a team get that to the funds and get them on board with that? Because right now, they're looking at numbers and lists as they are out there, and pitch decks and spreadsheets. How do we sort of connect with the ones that really get it and say, yeah, I get this. I need to see this person, see their talk, and see their background story, and so on.
Depends what stage you're talking about, right? If they make it to your show, they would already have been quite successful, wouldn't they?
These go from pre-seed up to A.
Pre-seed up to A.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think coming from an investor's perspective, if your show is able to surface talent from pockets of the region that we are blindsided to, that would be valuable, right? Because the fact of the matter is, if you're a good founder, we would already know you. The word gets around, yeah, even at an early stage. And if you have a good investor or VC fund behind you, they make sure that people know about you. So then where's the value of a podcast series like yours, right? Yeah, I would say pockets of talent and in regions that we might not have the that network of gossips into yet, right? That would be great.
So what is that? So I mean, obviously you've got a very good footprint and a good network, a funnel. What would be the blind side for funds like you know, in sense that there'll be certain areas of talent that may be overlooked? Because, 5 million startups in Asia, you can't have access to all of them, right? So, and there's the immediacy bias as well. So how do we, what would you suggest those blind sides are? Because I think if we, like your Harangi friend is like, if we can democratize this, we could do for the startup ecosystem what MTV did for music.
Yeah.
What do you think those blind sides are?
Yeah, where we don't normally spend enough time in, right? In markets where we don't spend enough time in. So yeah, like Vietnam or even the fringes of China, Hong Kong. We spend quite some time in Malaysia and Indonesia, but then again, Indonesia is quite a big market too, right? So I think it depends from fund to fund. Maybe there's an argument around female founders, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
just because they're really good, but they are not very good at marketing themselves. They're not very good. So we always have this rule, right? That if a male founder pitches to us, we have to discount it by 20%.
Right.
If a female founder pitches to us, we have to give her a 20% premium.
Yeah.
It's just the stage of human civilization that we're at this point. So if they're really great, so you can split it in different ways, right? Whether it's demographic, whether it's geography, whether it's some startup verticals that people don't really look into, Yeah.
I like the female founder premium. I was looking at the numbers in Angel List. I think in the top 50 angels by deal volume in Singapore, there's one female.
In the partners or in
Singapore.
The portfolio companies?
Singapore. So listed by deals done on Angel List, there's only one, and she's actually not in Singapore. She's based in Hong Kong. So, I mean, it's incredible. So I think there's a lot of work to happen.
Globally,
yeah,
only 2% of VC money goes to female founders.
Yeah.
Although there's data to say that any company that has at least one female co-founder lasts longer and is more profitable.
Absolutely.
So there's all these contradictory facts. So use that as an arbitrage,
I'm on board, yeah. And I think the thing is female founders tend to sort of approach the problem a little bit more realistic than a male founder. So there's a lot of that male founder, I'm going to go and challenge and I'm going to go and blow this thing up. Females may take things a bit more sort of considerately. And I think that's probably speaking the language of an investor. Yeah. If we did a female founder demo day, do you think that would work?
It better be good.
It
still has to be good.
Yeah, it will be good because if they're female founders, then they kick ass.
Yeah, so we may have to work harder to find them. To find they may be in Yangon, they may be in Vietnam. There are some countries that are naturally pumping up more female founders. Interestingly, actually,
China, for example.
Yeah. More matriarch than patriarch, right? And yeah, if that's the thing, right? We cannot cut the slack on quality as well, right?
Yeah.
Like the Found Ventures is an entire female investment committee, but we never market it that way because we still invest in the best founders, whether you are female or male, and we do struggle looking for we try to use our unconscious bias, right, to be pro female, but it's still less in supply.
Well, I mean, what is that? Is it just that women are less likely to step up and market themselves because they're more worried about criticism? Is that? I mean, there's a lot of factors, social factors.
So many, yeah.
I mean, I'm very careful about talking about this. I have to sort of do it through you. What's the
one hypothesis we have is that female founders rarely start businesses just to get rich. So they don't have that mercenary way of talking and that focus in just saying, talk about valuation and quadrupling that or whatever in 2 years. A lot of female founders we see start something out of passion, right? Out of something they truly, truly believe in. And when you mix passion with, I mean, is the necessary fuel to start a company, but it is a slightly different language system than what VCs that are predominantly and previously white male dominated would recognize. So it's already a different voice, So how do we as the investor group overcome some of these unconscious bias and pattern recognition?
Yeah.
To be I don't even it's a big topic. It's a big topic that has to be systematically chipped on, globally.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this conversation adds to that. I think it's about storytelling because where all that comes from is role models. And unfortunately, you have very few compared to me as a kid growing up, like, in business, like male role models. I can take your pick. There's thousands and thousands. The media is full of them. And that is really a media bias, right? You can pick all the business people. They're all men, right? Yet when you're a woman, you're looking around, it's a lot harder, isn't it? And that has an impact on people because you're inspired to do something because of a role model at some point, a story that you've heard.
It's a significant adult,
So that is what we need to give a platform to. So, having this conversation with you today, hopefully can be another story that we can put out there as a role model. And I think you're a great role model for not just female founders, but for male founders as well. So let's get that out there and hopefully that does its bit, right?
Hopefully our generation of founders will do something different for the next generation. That would be a great hope to have. Yeah.
Well, let's end on that very positive note. Grace Tsai, everybody, co-founder and co-CEO of Found8. Grace, it's been a real privilege speaking to you today and hearing a bit about your story. Thank you for inviting us here to Found8 on your new, recently merged co-working space. And, all more power to you. You've been here since the start of the ecosystem.
Thanks,
hopefully more success stories will come through this platform. So thank you very much today.
Thanks.